we are still solving equations. So these are not multiple choice, but if they give you an equation, and again, they just want you to solve for b, right? So they didn't give you the directions on this, but they would say something to the effect of find b, solve for b, solve the equation, and so forth. So if they say any of those things, or find a zero, or find the x-intercept, that's kind of what you're doing is you're solving. So a single equation, and you only have one variable in there, so you can put it in nsolve. So nsolve is your go-to, no matter how crazy and fancy it is, right? We're going to do some techniques after the STAR test on doing these by hand that will make the math easier, and I will teach those to you after the STAR test. But for the STAR test, just focus on getting the correct answer in using nsolve, using the calculator, and then we're going to go back and practice all this stuff by hand after the STAR test, just to get ready for classes for next year and to get ready for that TSI test that you'll be taking. Okay, so again, type carefully. So when you do these in nsolve, especially these that where the equation ends with in parentheses, this is the second one on your paper. So you have this whole equation that you type in, but it ends in a parentheses, then you still have to put a comma x and then close the parentheses, because this first one needs its closing over here. And of course, these are always in sets of twos. So if you do a parentheses in the middle here, you still got to come back and have a closing for that one. And then once you hit enter, let's see what this one is. And this one gave you a really weird, ugly answer, right? So these are not always pretty numbers. So let me see what this other one, this is number one that I just typed. Oops, I don't want that. Let's go back one. Sorry, I had my key in the wrong spot when I was doing that. Let's go there. And now let's hit enter. Okay, so I took that extra parentheses away. Now we're just going to hit enter. This is actually problem number one typed in very carefully, and it was negative 0.625. So negative 0.625, and the other one was 1.65414. So hopefully you're just going to go put these in the calculator and do them, right? You've got two more to go down here. Type carefully. It's just solving an equation for x, right? Solving an equation for w, which means you're going to put x's in the calculator, not w's. Okay, so go do those if you have not already done so, and check your answers. I'll pause. You can pause the video. Hopefully you've gone and done that, and you're coming back and pausing the video. This one was 0.833, and it just kept repeating, right? So you would look for an answer that matches that, and this was negative 8/3. Oh, I didn't put it in the calculator to see what that actually equals. So it was actually negative 8/3. So if you go put that in the calculator, and nsolve is going to give it to you as a decimal, but maybe they have the answer on the answer sheet like this, and you want to see if it matches the decimal answer, then you can put this fraction in the calculator. So if I go do a control divide, and I can't see this and do it at the same time, so I need to do control, and then divide, and then I'm going to put in a negative 8/3. 8/3. If I move it down here, and put 3, and then hit enter. There you go. So if I put that in the calculator, it tells me negative 8/3. So it's simplified as far as it will go, but I want to change it to a decimal. So how do we do that? We hit the control over here, control, and then enter. So control, enter will change it from a decimal into, from a fraction into a decimal. So negative 2.667. Actually just that 66, what they're doing with that 2.666, that what they're doing here is they're rounding it. It's just going 2.6666 forever, but if you round it right here, then that next, if you chop it off, then that becomes a 7 because the number after it was bigger than 5. So it is just 2.666, and it just keeps repeating. And that would be that answer. You would just find an answer that matches it, and it would probably be, no, I don't know if it would be in fraction form or not. Probably on the answer key it would be the fraction form. Anyway, that was the top section. Again, just nsolve. As soon as you see an equation and there's only one variable, nsolve is your go-to. Now these down here we're solving. Still a single equation. So your first thought should be, oh, it's an equation. They say solve for x. You can do this. You can go put it in nsolve. The problem is these are squared. See how there's an x squared in this? All of these were x to the first power, right? X's to b's to the first power. D's to the first power, W's to the first power. There's no W squareds in here at all, right? Everything is to the first power. So these are all linear. And that straight line is only going to cross the x-axis at one point. So there's only one answer, right? Now sometimes it's no solution or infinite solution, but we haven't seen those in a while. But we will practice those also in the STAR test just to make sure that we remember what they look like. I can't remember offhand now. Seems like the nsolve. It tells you if it's no solution and I think it's the infinite one that's kind of weird that you have to watch out for because you're not really sure about the infinite unless you go do it by hand. But anyway, if it's a definite answer, though, you'll get the definite answer. But these, I'm sorry, I digress there. So if it's a single equation and it's linear, meaning to the first power only, nsolve works no problem. These, you can put it in and it will give you one solution, but there's actually going to be two solutions most of the time when they're quadratic because the shape of these is going to be a parabola. And how many times is that parabola going to cross the x-axis? usually twice. So most of the time, not always, but most of the time when there's an x squared in the equation, you're going to have two solutions, not just one. Now there will be times when the parabola never touches the x-axis, in which case there's no solution. And there's other times when it just comes down and touches at the vertex, and there's only one solution. So there could be no solutions, there could be one solution, there could be two solutions. But most of the time when it's quadratic, there are two solutions. So the problem is if you do n-solve in here, you're only going to get one answer. But on a multiple choice question, you can use that to eliminate some of the answers, right? Because if that answer's not in there, then you know you can eliminate those. But to get both answers, you're going to need to graph it. So the only way to do quadratics completely is to graph them, okay? And if I want to graph them, they need to be in y equals format. Now, there are no y's in this equation, but if 0 is on one side all by itself, then I can substitute the y in for the 0, and now it is in y equals, and I can go put this in the graph screen, right? So back over here, I'm going to go back to home, and instead of going to the add subtract screen, I go to the graph screen. I want to graph this one and look for the x-intercept. So my y equals is already in the calculator, and all I got to do is type in the x squared minus 9x plus 18, and then I can go trace around it. So x squared, let me put this one in real quick. I'm not going to put the rest of them in. X squared minus 9x plus 18. Subtract 9x plus 18 plus 18. Boom, boom. Okay, so there's the equation typed in. Y equals x squared minus 9x plus 18. And then I can hit enter, and it's going to graph this. Okay, now I want to know exactly what these two numbers are, what's crossing the x-axis, so put it in trace mode. Remember, trace mode is menu. Once it's in, I hit menu, and here's trace right there, the fifth one down. And I want to trace the graph, so menu 5-1. And now, down here in the corner is the coordinates, the ordered pair that goes with that point. Now, if I remember, I'm right now up at positive 18, so I need to come down the y-axis. So I need to go left and right only. Only left and right will move you around. If you go up and down, you won't move. But I want to go to the right. Every time I click to the right, watch my cursor, it moves. And I'm getting closer down to the x-axis because I'm now at 3, 2, almost there. There I am. So right now I'm crossing at 3. This point right here is 3, 0. So the x number is a 3. So one of my answers is a 3. And I want to go find the other one. So I'm going to continue on around the parabola, down past the vertex. Now I'm on the vertex and then back up the other side. And here I come up, and there's the other one. So it's crossing at 3 and 6. So 3 and 6 are the two solutions. Okay, those are the two different numbers that x could be, that if you plug in a 3 there and a 3 there and do this math, it equals 0. If I plug in a 6 there and a 6 there and do this math, it equals 0. So there's usually two answers when it's a quadratic. So you could do n-solve, but it's only going to give you one of the two answers. And most of the time, they're going to ask you for both. Okay? Now, occasionally, if one's negative and one's positive, they may say, what's the positive answer? Or what's the negative answer? Okay? So sometimes the n-solve might help you out. That doesn't hurt to try it, but just remember that there's usually two answers. So if you're looking for two answers, you may as well just go ahead and put it in y equals format, put it in the calculator, and trace it. Find the two x-intercepts. Because solutions, another name for solutions, are my x-intercepts. Same thing as zeros. Zeros are my x-intercepts. Okay, so this one, again, when you're getting ready to solve it, you notice that there's only x's, so you could put it in n-solve, but you notice that it's squared. So you might want to say, hey, you know what? I'd rather just go graph it and find the two x-intercepts, find the two solutions. Is it already in 0 equals? Yes, so can I just substitute y there? Yes, so it's already in y equals. I can just type in x squared plus 5x plus 4, hit enter, trace it around the parabola, menu 5-1, put it in trace mode, go trace around, find the two x-intercepts. So make sure you can do that. Now down here on this one, here's my k's, but I don't use k's, I'm going to use x's. It's a single equation, but it's squared, so I'm going to use x's when I put it in the calculator. You could do n-solve if you want to, but it's only going to give you one of the two answers. So I might go ahead and just stick it, solve it I'm going to just go ahead and trace it and find the two x-intercepts. So in order to do that, though, there's no y's, so I can't solve for y, but there are numbers on both sides. I need to get a 0 over here. Now, I'm thinking it's easier to move the 56 over than try to move both these pieces to the right. So I either need to get a 0 on this side or I need to get a 0 on this side. And this looks like a lot less work. So I'm just going to get rid of the negative 56 by adding 56. Because remember, up here we had 0 already. So if I add 56 to one side, I'm going to add 56 to this side. And I'm going to rewrite. Over here, I'm now 0 equals, which is where my y is going to be. So this is y equals now. I'm just going to rewrite this, k squared plus 15k plus 56. So k squared, k, and then the number. None of those are like terms. I just write them all down. And now I can put this in the calculator using x's instead of k's, and then trace around the parabola and find the two places where it's crossing the x-axis, assuming it's crossing at two places, right? And then write those two numbers down. Same thing here on this one. Go give it a whirl. Pause the video. Go see what you get. If you notice it was also a single equation. Only had x's in it, so you could say, hey, I could use nsolve, but it's got a squared in here. So I could get one of the answers, but it's not going to give me both of the answers. And if there are two answers, I want to know both answers. So if you did nsolve, great. If not, you might want to go ahead and, since this is not a multiple choice, I would probably feel better about tracing it and finding both of them, right? So to get this by itself, I can either get rid of all of these pieces, or I can just get rid of this piece, and I'm thinking this is easier to get rid of. So let's subtract 3x. If I do it to one side, I'm going to do it to the other side. Notice I lined it up under the like terms. So x's are gone. This is now 0 equals, so now I can put it in the calculator with y equals. And then over here, this is now x squared. 17 minus 3 is a positive 14x. Those are like terms. And then plus 49. Now the equation is in y equals format. I can put it in the calculator, trace around it, find the two x-intercepts. Assuming there are two. Maybe there's none. Maybe there's only one. So if you did this, number 2 up here, the answer was -1 and -4. So it crossed the x-axis at two places. This one over here, if you did it, crossed again at two places. K's could be -7 and -8. So -7 and -8 both worked for k. And over here, it only touched at one place at -7. So there's only one solution on this one. It just touched it at one place. And so my solution is -7. All right, the last page. It's a bunch of word problems. But don't freak out. They're not hard. Now, you know me. I never read all the blah, blah, blah. I start at the end. It says, what is the temperature in degrees Celsius when the temperature in degrees Celsius, I have no idea how to pronounce that, is 78 degrees. So I want to find Celsius, right? Did they give me a formula? They did. They said D is equal to 3/2 100 minus C, and D is my degrees in degrees, whatever that is, and C is the temperature in Celsius. So C is in Celsius, and I want to find what is the temperature in Celsius. That's what I'm looking for. I want to find what that number is right there when, because there's two variables here, right? I can't solve it when there's two variables, but they're telling me that Delisle is 78 degrees. So what am I going to plug in for this one right there? They're telling me to plug in 78 for that thing. And then I have a number, and just one variable. Can I solve that in nsolve? Yes. So they're going to give you the equation. Now, if there's two variables, they're probably going to tell you to plug something in for one of them and then go find the other one. So that's what they did in this one. So literally, you're going to type in 78, go to nsolve, 78 equals 3/2, control divide, parentheses 100 minus C, close the parentheses, comma X, close the big parentheses, and hit enter and see what it is. Okay? So you pause the video, go do that, see what you get. And see which answer it is. It should match one of the answers if you type carefully. You're correct. If you did that one, it was C. Okay? So go do the rest of these. Pause the video if you need to, and then come back and check your answers here in just a minute. Okay, so hopefully you're pausing, you're coming back. Now this is an interesting one. Again, I start at the end. It says, what is the length b squared in inches? So I'm looking for b, and it's not b squared, it's b sub 2. What they did in this formula is it's about trapezoids. And so trapezoids have two bases. You've got a base 1 and a base 2. So one's a short base and one's a long base. And so they use b1 for one number and b2 for the other base. But it's not like it's being squared or anything like that. It's just like they could have just used b and q over here for all they cared. One could be called b and one could be called q. So they just use b sub 1 to say it's one of them and b sub 2 is the other one because they're going to be two different numbers. So let's go back in here and see what we did. They said, here's the first formula, trapezoid, blah, 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 base is B1, B2 for a trapezoid-shaped garden with the base of measuring 16 feet. Oh, so they have some numbers they plugged in here. They said the base is 16, the height is 12, the area is 168. Oh, the formula becomes, look at this. Did they give you the new equation? Yes. Is there a number, and just one missing thing? See, up here you had a whole bunch of variables, right? But they plugged in all those numbers for you and wrote it for you down here. It is just an equation, and I am looking for that one variable, right? So when I put this in the calculator, what am I going to put in? You're right, that becomes your x. So it's just type it in nsolve, use the X there, comma, X at the end, close your parentheses, and go see what the answer is, right? We're just solving for the variable. So even though they look fancy and hard, kind of stay with the end. And if they have an equation given to you, you're just in solve. We're just solving for that. Okay, so hopefully you've done and put that one in, and it did wind up being 12 inches. Okay, so pause the video, go do the other two if you have not already. Okay, hopefully you have done both 11 and 12 and you're coming back to check your answers. So again, I start at the end. What is the value of S? So I'm looking for S. And as I'm scanning this, I see this equation. And when I look at this equation, it is an equation. Does it have S's in there? And there's no other variables, right? So if all I'm doing is finding S, that means I'm solving for S. Can I just go put this equation in NSolve and just go find S? Yes, but when you type it in, what are you going to use instead of S's? You used an X. Very good. Hopefully you did that when you did it. And of course, it wound up being 58. So when you go do this one, you just type in 58, one number in one box, one number in the other box. Since it was positive, you didn't have to put a plus sign if you didn't want to. And same thing over here. What is the value of P? And did they give you an equation that had P's in it? Yes, they did. Do I even need to read the rest of it? Not really. You can if you want to, knock your socks off. But, on test day, I'm kind of lazy about stuff like that. If I can see that I'm looking for P and they give me the equation with P in it, stick it in NSolve. Instead of P's, use X's. And the calculator's going to tell you. What did the calculator tell you? Did it tell you it was 149? You're so brilliant. Of course it did. So that's as easy as these get, guys. So just know when to recognize NSolve. If it's a single equation, now if it's squared, I wouldn't necessarily use NSolve, but it wouldn't hurt to put it in just to get one answer. But do know that you may have to still go solve for y equals or 0 equals, so you can put a quadratic equation in the graph and go look for the two x-intercepts. But anyway, so much for today. That is all of our solving. Tomorrow we're going to have slope and then a bunch of mixed review to go with it.